This week in Texas politics is a week where political fights certainly escalated. Let's get our headlines from our panel, and we'll start first with Patrick Svitek with Texas Tribune. Patrick, what's your headline for the week?
Border showdown. We've seen a number of these between the state and the federal government, but this one seems almost more high stakes than ever if it was possible.
Business analyst Andy Spillman, what's your headline for the week?
Immigration surge may sway 2024 election, says mayor on Texas border.
And Brian Smith with St. Edward's University. Brian, what's your headline for the week?
The Ken Paxton impeachment revenge tour is coming to a Republican primary near you.
The border battle between Governor Greg Abbott and President Biden certainly escalated this week. It's gotten so crazy that Democrat Texas Congressman Castro and Casar said they want the president to federalize the Texas Guard. That certainly is a heck of an escalation in the shades of, JFK versus George Wallace, that schoolhouse stand segregation fight. Brian, it's a different topic, but somewhat of the same issue, states' rights, right?
Well, states' rights is very reductionist. What we're seeing is the continual battle between the obligations, prohibitions, and powers of the states versus the federal government. And this really seems to be more of a case of border politics, but by other means than something like Eisenhower calling the federal troops to enact and enforce the Browns decision. Federalizing the troops over this issue really does lower the bar, though, for future use of armed forces for political ends. I think there are better and more democratic solutions to this problem than Joe Biden saying, hey, National Guard, you're now federalized.
And are you watching this? Is this a real escalation, or do you think it's a rhetorical escalation?
I mean, listen, the governor has the power to invoke constitutional authority to protect our citizens in our state. And I can tell you, speaking on behalf of much of the business community, most especially positioned in the Valley, it's warranted on multiple levels, which I'll explain also later in the segment. I've been visiting with a lot of candidates lately for the Texas Ledge, as well as sitting incumbent legislators who have been going door to door in their districts. And every single one of them, Democrat and Republican, have said that the border immigration issue is the number one concern, number one topic at the door. So in this case, the governor is listening to his constituency and invoking, our constitutional protected right to defend our state. So in this case, I don't necessarily think this is a political move. I think he's listening to his constituency.
Patrick, what do you think? Political, or is this a real escalation?
Well, I think we've talked about on this show before about the politics of the border in Texas, which just continue to overwhelmingly favor the Abbott position, generally speaking. Voters, not just Republican primary voters, but voters across Texas continue to rank immigration and the border as their top issue. And especially if the choice is between Greg Abbott and Joe Biden on that issue, general election voters in Texas will overwhelmingly side with the Abbott position on things, even if they don't always agree with individual actions that Abbott is taking. But if, again, as a general political matter in Texas, if it's Abbott or Biden on border policy, voters have been siding with Abbott.
While we have a escalating situation on the South Texas border, things are escalating at Capitol Hill with trying to figure out a border deal with the Senate. One of the ideas is ramping up the E-Verify database that employers use to verify immigration status. That's part of that discussion. Annie, what are business leaders saying about that idea? Is that a key factor, or do they just want to say hands off?
Well, I mean, this is what I was leading to in the first question. Look, it's completely warranted for lawmakers to want to deal with the immigration issues in our country. But E-Verify won't make a dent without comprehensive reforms on the federal level as well, or the state level if the feds won't do anything. It's completely unfair to put the onus on Texas businesses to enforce immigration laws. Potential sweeping legislation giving government power to shut down businesses that for any reason fail to verify or not verify all new employees in the E-Verify system. That's just not fair. The E-Verify procedure can be good if well thought out, but it could also be used as a tool to go after businesses. And just to elaborate briefly, an agency can verify the verification or lack thereof in a couple of manners, and that is to require a business to certify under penalty of perjury that it has complied with statute, or establish a complaint an investigation procedure to ferret out violations or provide some mechanism for false positives which occur or potential error in the E-Verify system itself, or an administrative process for businesses to challenge an agency's enforcement action. So there's a lot that goes into the E-Verify discussion. It may not be good or bad, but it's really a lot to ferret out. And if there's an actually established nationwide E-Verify system that is mandated onto all businesses, this could also come at a high cost to taxpayers for potential agency review time and staff.
You know, politicians love to punt the issue to another person, and if they can't stop the flow at the border, Patrick, why not punt it to businesses, put it on them? You've got to enforce it.
Yeah, as a political matter, I mean, this is a divide. I think we've increasingly seen it on immigration from within the Republican Party on their rhetoric. There are some Republicans on the more conservative spectrum who do want to put more of the onus on business to have more of a role in trying to stop this issue through this E-Verify proposal. But as Annie just pointed out, you also have other lawmakers, including other Republicans, who have legitimate concerns about the burden that you're placing on business. So as a political matter, it does get at what I think is, a divide on immigration inside the Republican Party that's been simmering for a while.
Is there an upside to punting it to the businesses, Brian, saying, hey, we can't stop them at the border, we'll stop them at the business?
Well, E-Verify, I mean, it's a solution for those people that are living and working in the United States right now. And the immigration issue is cleaved. We used to think about border policy as part of the immigration debate, but it's grown so much that it's now a separate issue. And the E-Verify thing would be part of a larger immigration policy, but Republicans want the border addressed. I think many Americans do, and they're not too concerned about who's in charge of verifying with E-Verify.
Several governors from more than 20 different states here in the United States posting on social media that they are standing with Governor Abbott and Texas. But there are reports that Donald Trump wants to prevent any kind of deal being made on Capitol Hill so he can keep this issue moving into the election cycle. Patrick, does that work or not?
That's a loaded question, but I think Trump here is doing a very Trump thing and almost saying the quiet part out loud. I mean, he recognizes that having this issue front and center for the presidential election probably benefits him. You obviously look at national polling and see that this is an issue on which Republicans are doing well, especially again if the alternative is Joe Biden, like I said earlier. And so, but of course that goes against the interests of actually solving the problem in the near term, which at least some Republicans in Congress appear to be making a genuine effort to do.
Yeah, but Annie, no solution is no solution. So why not get something? And no one really expects the whatever deal's coming out is going to solve the problem, right?
Right. I mean, look, the border's always going to be an issue. It's going to be something to talk about for whomever's in charge, even when Trump was president. And I know that, as of Thursday evening, Trump joined in backing Texas in the fight and asked other states to deploy their guards. So, while he may be saying one thing and sort of doing another, it's still sort of his play, to be part of the discussion. But, it's interesting because now you're even hearing with the border issue being topic, not even du jour, but du jour every du jour. They're even now talking about Abbott making a good running mate for Trump, being that the border is such a national topic. So, it could be the impetus for even more discussion.
Brian, if Trump sinks the deal, couldn't that hurt him in the election cycle, though?
I don't think they're going to sink a deal unless it involves the Republican Party getting absolutely everything that they want. They're going to keep moving those goalposts until they get 100% of 100% of the issues that they care about. And I don't think the Biden administration's going to be willing to sell at his party on this issue. If he agrees to the Republican demands, it's an admission that his border policy has failed and that a flip-flop this close to the election could be disastrous because he needs progressives, he needs Latino voters, and if he sells them out, it's not good news. So I don't see any deals happening.
In a strange way, Texas has added steam to the Trump train. Texas Senator John Cornyn this week jumped on that train with Senator Ted Cruz, another former Trump critic. Annie, did Cornyn's endorsement of Trump surprise you?
Yeah, well, it's certainly interesting, especially after Trump had previously hurled insults at Cornyn in the last several years, saying that he was weak and ineffective and very bad for the Republican Party and our nation. But as they say, there's no crying in politics. You move on, and Cornyn may see the writing on the wall and decided to join the team. Or maybe it's one of those situations where it's keep your enemies closer.
Patrick, he was a loud critic of Trump. Did it surprise you?
It did surprise me a little bit, but I also interpreted it as somewhat of a signal that Cornyn at least wants to keep on the table the possibility of running for re-election in 2026 when Donald Trump could be president, and he would, of course, love for Trump to support him in his primary in 2026, or at least stay neutral in his primary. We already know there are a number of Texas Republicans looking at running for that seat in 2026, whether Cornyn's in it or not. And so I thought it was additionally interesting as far as looking forward to how Cornyn may be thinking about the next, 2 to 3 years of his political career.
We're only 2 states into this primary process, and we're already hearing a lot of party leaders on both sides saying it's over. Let's go ahead. So, Brian, why even do primaries anymore? Why not just go straight to conventions?
Well, if we remember, we used to go straight to the conventions, and it ended in 1968 because it was a terrible system. The current system's so much more democratic, inclusive, transparent. People actually get a chance to select who their nominee is going to be, but it isn't a perfect system. And right now we might not have a lot of candidate choice out there, but we do have the process. And I think we need to go through with this because the process is there. We don't want to return to the smoke-filled rooms of Mayor Daley picking the nominee against the will of the people.
Well, there's no smoking anymore in those rooms, but Patrick, why not just go straight to the conventions and just say, there's primary fatigue, right?
Well, I think people would make an academic case at a minimum that the primaries are more democratic. They're easy to access for voters. Conventions require more organization. There's more of a burden of access for voters. And so I think that's maybe the small d Democratic case for doing primaries instead of conventions. I'll just add on this topic. It's remarkable, a year ago, Ron DeSantis was the hottest thing in Republican politics nationally, but especially in Texas. Everyone was speculating about what Governor Abbott was doing and how it was inspired, potentially by what Ron DeSantis was doing in Florida. And that hold that he had on, Texas politics from, a couple states away, really just faded away so quickly. He only got the endorsement of 2 elected officials in Texas at the state level or beyond, State Rep Matt Schaefer and Congressman Chip Roy. Everyone eventually fell in, all the notable statewide officials ended up falling in line behind Trump. So there really was never a primary in Texas to speak of.
Annie, are the business PACs saying, hey, maybe we ought to just cut bait and go straight to conventions?
No, look, we need the primaries to keep democracy and national pride. I'm just kidding. The primaries are all about fundraising. No. Seriously, though, I mean, the primaries really are time for Americans to view debate. It's time for the businesses to get their issues on the table for discussion and potential for folks to get involved in caucuses where they have those in the states. But it really does bring issues forward and creates discussions among peers, which is important. Granted, the phone spamming gets old, but we should be thankful for the process.
The Democratic Senate primary race certainly has escalated. Roland Gutierrez calling out the leading rival, Colin Allred, a dino Democrat in name only because Allred criticized the Biden border policy. This seems to be both are trying to energize the hard left. Gutierrez calling for an assault rifle ban, Allred calling for a ban on abortion bans. Brian, where is this heading? Who's going to be more left, and can anyone pivot back to the middle?
Well, yes, Gutierrez is playing for the runoff. You have a lot of candidates in the race and a lot of undecided voters. So this is his best chance of denying Allred 50% in the first round. The only place he's going to find voters is from the left. Allred, on the other hand, is matching Ted Cruz dollar for dollar. So it remains his nomination to lose.
Patrick, there was a poll that said, regardless of who wins the Democrat nomination, it's a toss-up with Cruz. But the poll said that about Beto in 2018. What are you tracking?
Look, I think we all take general election statewide polls in Texas with a grain of salt after the last few election cycles. But yeah, I will say that Allred's strategy here, it really isn't about the left. I mean, he is running openly and proudly on his record of bipartisanship in the House. He's mostly ignoring Roland Gutierrez and not trying to get into fights with him that could drag him further to the left. Allred is betting that he can win this primary outright and then go on to the business of focusing full time on Ted Cruz. He's already focusing pretty overwhelmingly on Ted Cruz, and so that's Allred's bet here. And Gutierrez is hoping that he can poke enough holes in Allred's happy talk of bipartisanship to make Democratic primary voters think twice and at least send this thing to a runoff.
Annie, does Allred's push in regards to the abortion being pro-abortion, does that hurt him with the business community?
No, I don't think so. And I agree with Patrick. I don't even know if that's where he's trying to make the play, to be honest. I think he is kind of running on his bipartisanship, but he might be really trying to pick up that Hispanic vote, especially in South Texas, with not necessarily on the abortion side of it, but really focusing again on the border. And I think, Gutierrez is trying to poke holes, by trying to sort of pick a fight. But Allred is made the smart move here. And, I think by deciding to take harder steps on the border, he may be able to pick up those Hispanic votes, especially in South Texas. And so I think he's riding in the right direction.
The standoff in the Ken Paxton fight with his whistleblowers certainly escalating this week, with Paxton camp taking a swing at the Travis County judge in the whistleblower case, and Paxton is upset that he's going to have to testify. But then late in the week, a leading state senator, Drew Springer, said, wait a minute, maybe we need an impeachment redo. Brian, did that catch you by surprise?
It really did, because the last one was so disappointing for the opponents of the Attorney General that I don't know if they want to set themselves up for another failure. And I think soap opera is a great word for it, because we've had mistresses, fake names, trials, payouts, everything. And so, but unlike TV soap operas that can go on forever, I think a lot of Texans want this one to end. And so another impeachment trial, I don't think is something that's really viable.
What do you think, Patrick? An impeachment redo, is that possible? Is it even possible?
Well, Drew Springer was asking if it's possible, if there was he said, is there a legal mechanism to reopen the proceedings? We don't know if it's possible. I think it's very unlikely. I will say I was surprised by his letter. He is not seeking reelection, so the political consequences for him are not as high stakes as they would be for most of his Republican colleagues to try to reopen this conversation. But it's still nonetheless was a bold statement, and one that really caught my attention.
A lot of the Republicans in the Senate have egg on their face when Paxton said, I'll null contest the whistleblower's claims, which basically says I admit to the several of the impeachment articles. Annie, so does it make a difference? Is the business community taking note?
It's funny because in speaking with those candidates and also incumbent legislators that do have primaries, knocking door to door, it's been very interesting because very few of them have said that the Paxton impeachment trial has even really come up at all, even among the business community. And I'll tell you that Senator Springer is he's a business owner. And so him making a move like this sort of says, not only do I not care as a senator, I'm going to say what I want to say, but as a business owner, you really make no impression on what I'm doing as a business owner. So maybe he's sort of speaking on behalf of the business community, but these are the days of our lives. I will make note that in the last sort of turn of events, and they're sort of going back and forth on social media, Paxton said that Springer was a bad senator and that's why he had to leave. But Springer bounced back by saying, no, he needed to go out and make an honest living in the private sector because he hadn't learned how to profit off of the public sector like AG Paxton had. So not obviously that's a diss to the AG, but that's also a business owner saying, hey, we're out here trying to make a living, and the posturing and the politics, we don't want it. We don't want any more of it.
All right, let's wrap up this week as the world turns. Another soap opera nod. And close things out with a word. Brian, give us a word for the week.
I don't know if it's a word, but re-impeachment.
Annie, what's your word for the week?
Impasse.
And Patrick, what is your word for the week?
Reversal, because in writing about Paxton's change of position in its whistleblower lawsuit, we've been using that word a lot, the Tribune.
And that is This Week in Texas Politics.